这次整个乌克兰危机，普丁说：“美国，你不要认为只有你可以来挑拨我的邻邦，我也可以在古巴部署飞弹。”人们再次的形容这一次的俄乌边境，其实事实上是美俄冲突。这一次的美俄冲突很像1962年的古巴危机。什么是古巴危机呢？它从猪猡湾事件发展成古巴危机。我待会儿为大家特别介绍这一段历史。比较重要的是，当时是一个 real 的，是一个真实的危机。人类很多人担心马上陷入第3次世界大战，而且是核子大战。它总共协商的时间，在1962年的10月14号协商到10月28号，历时只有13天。美国的总统 J.F. Kennedy 快速的和苏联的总书记赫鲁雪夫在这件事情里头热线通话达成协议，跟这一次已经历时了快要整整1个月完全不同。刚开始的时候，美国派出来的很多谈话的都是低层级的官员，像副国务卿，而俄罗斯派出来的是次长，外交部次长。接着呢，才又变成国务卿，然后才变成是外交部部长哈。某个程度来讲，就不是总统有热线通话，可是这个热线通话不是真实的、诚恳的、立即的要解决危机的方式，所以它跟当时呢是一个真实的危机，这次可能是一个比较像创造出来的半真半假的一个危机，在这个危机当中有大国的博弈跟盘算等等，而这里头牵涉到的就是谁可以最后成功的出售天然气给欧盟。在这个情况里头，这可能是所有问题里头的核心。所以当大家谈到它是古巴危机的时候，我们其实来为大家做一个比较，什么是古巴危机和这一次情况完全不同。
Я же вот говорил о красных линиях, через которые мы считаем нельзя переходить. Я хочу, чтобы всем было понятно, и у нас в стране, и за рубежом, нашими партнерами, чтобы было понятно. Дело даже не в той линии, которую мы не хотим, чтобы кто-то переступил. Дело в том, что нам некуда уже отходить.
This would be the largest, if he were to move in with all those forces, it'd be the largest invasion since World War II. It would change the world.
Pretty much immediately following the Allied victory in World War II, the United States and Soviet Union became bitter enemies, kicking off a decades-long struggle for global influence known as the Cold War. Espionage and intelligence were at the center of this conflict, most crucially surrounding the mutual buildup of nuclear arsenals capable of unprecedented levels of destruction.
从20世纪跨到21世纪，似曾相识的东西强权竞争。冷战时期，以美国为首的资本主义国家对上以苏联为首的社会主义共产党执政国家，展开从经济、意识形态、政治体系到军武实力的竞赛。来到现今，美国依旧是居高临下，俄罗斯延续解体的苏联，急于重振雄风，美俄再度走到外交和解或是爆发战争的十字路口，就如同冷战当时的古巴飞弹危机。
The Cuban Missile Crisis was the closest the world has ever come to nuclear apocalypse. An ever-escalating arms race had led to the deployment of Soviet missiles in Cuba, which were now prepped and ready to fire on Washington, New York, and almost the entire eastern seaboard. An invasion force of over 120,000 soldiers gathered on the shores of Florida, and almost 3,000 American nuclear weapons were locked onto targets across the Soviet Union. The defining event of the Cold War, it would see the world's leading superpowers fight in a dangerous battle for nuclear superiority, just 90 miles from the American coast. For 13 days in October 1962, American President John F. Kennedy and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev would engage in a battle of wills, where one wrong move could lead to global destruction.
当时在军备竞赛上，美国维持大幅领先，凭是在意大利和土耳其部署核武的优势。倘若真和苏联交战，美国预期能迅速占上风。但古巴革命为苏联带来转机，卡斯楚开始清除美国帝国主义下的经济活动和产业，为日后的古巴飞弹危机埋下引爆点。
Things would change in 1959, when communist revolutionary Fidel Castro managed to gain power in Cuba, with American-owned banks, casinos, as well as coffee and sugar plantations, all being nationalized, with Castro eventually turning to the Soviet Union for help and protection. Deciding that it was only a matter of time before Kennedy attempted another invasion of Cuba, Khrushchev decided to deploy nuclear missiles to the island in 1962. Launched from Cuba, they would be capable of delivering a nuclear strike on Florida, New York, and even the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., in just 13 minutes.
1962年10月14号，美国拍到古巴疑似新建飞弹基地的照片，开启历时13天的政治和军事对峙危机。16号，甘乃迪获中情局简报，得知苏联利用古巴作为核弹基地威胁美国。经过6天思索和权衡，22号，甘乃迪宣布了非军事回应的选项。
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere. I have directed that the following initial steps be taken immediately. First, to halt this offensive buildup, a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is...
But on the evening of October 26th, the first signs of a diplomatic solution would appear. Kennedy would receive an unexpected letter from Khrushchev outlining the potential terms of a deal. If the United States ended the blockade and promised not to invade Cuba, then Khrushchev would be willing to withdraw his troops. In exchange for the removal of the missiles, the United States would be willing to make a pledge not to invade Cuba. The removal of the Jupiter missiles in Turkey was also part of the deal, but this would have to remain a secret to avoid offending America's NATO allies. Khrushchev would just have to trust that the president would stick to his word. This was Kennedy's last hope. If the deal was rejected, he would have no choice but to go to war.
Each great power have their obligation to protect all their allies. They're far or close, they're important or they're not important. Khrushchev decided to send missiles there at the diplomatic signal. Don't invade Cuba, we are serious.
As night came on October 27th, no one knew what the next day would hold. The power to end the crisis now lay with Khrushchev. He could either swallow his pride and accept Kennedy's terms, or push for further concessions and risk provoking war. And that morning, he would broadcast his acceptance of the deal on Radio Moscow, bringing an end to the crisis.
冷战时期的美苏领导人最终选择以外交途径结束危机，避免引发可能导致相互毁灭的战争。当年的古巴飞弹危机换上现今的乌克兰危机。2021年4月，俄罗斯在乌克兰边境一度扩军后缩减，12月再度集结10万俄军，被视为随时有入侵基辅的可能。2022年1月，乌克兰的西方盟友持续和莫斯科谈判协商，同时双方也都调度军力备战。当年的美国总统甘乃迪从接获情资到做出海上封锁决定不到1星期，避免情势可能在持续拉锯下失控。乌克兰危机跨过新年还不见减缓，现任的美国总统拜登表示，要看普丁的行动才能决定如何回应。但这场博弈赌的是乌克兰的安全，乌克兰真有事，再多制裁恐也难以拨乱反正。